At that same conference, Athanasius Schneider lamented the great apostasy that is obviously afflicting the world today. Well, okay, great, but I'd like to ask this. Mr. Schneider, if there's a great apostasy going on these days, who do you think is the great apostate? And to give you a hint, sir, it's the same man whom you recently denounced as promoting the joy of adultery. See, this is the problem. People are not willing to allow the evidence to determine their position. A great apostasy can't come about by accident. Somewhere there is a great apostate. Remember, the Vatican II revolution didn't come from the ground up. It wasn't a bunch of laymen rebelling and then a weak hierarchy not doing anything about it and eventually succumbing. No, it was imposed from the top. John the 23rd got the ball rolling and put all the mechanisms in place, and then Paul VI finished the job. John Paul I only lived for 33 days in his role as a papal pretender, so he's kind of irrelevant, although he lived long enough to ensure he paid sufficient obeisance to the modernist revolution by combining both John the 23rd's and Paul VI's names into one, John Paul, which had never been done before. He also eliminated the papal coronation ceremony and got rid of the gestatorial chair. All that in 33 days. Yes, I know he resumed using the gestatorial chair, but he only did that because the people were complaining that they couldn't see their pope. And then John Paul II gave the modernist revolution the necessary charisma to make it attractive for the masses, especially the young, and he gave it plenty of pseudo-intellectual justification. Benedict XVI then came along and gave the whole thing a more traditional touch on the outside in terms of externals while pushing ahead with the modernist program. And now they've got Francis. So, again, it all came from the top. So when people tell you about how there are these terrible abuses going on, especially in the liturgy, you can remind them that the new Mass itself was the first abuse, and that one came from Paul VI. But while plenty of people are willing to acknowledge so many of these errors and outrages and blasphemies and heresies, very few people are apparently willing to allow this evidence to lead them to the only possible conclusion, and that is that the institution in the Vatican today is not the Catholic Church anymore, but an apostate sect that masquerades as the Catholic Church, while the real Catholic Church is eclipsed and underground, scattered among those few, clergy and laity, who still retain the same faith as the Church of Pope Pius XII and his predecessors, and do not profess communion with a public heretic. Somehow, people just absolutely refuse to go there. Now, while I can understand that it's not desirable in and of itself, it is the only possible option, because all the other alternatives run afoul of Catholic teaching. The Church can be underground for a while as she was before. A man can claim to be the Pope who really isn't. That's possible. But that the Church should defect and turn from being the ark of salvation into an ark of damnation, that is not possible. But people would apparently rather believe in a defected church, in a church that is as Protestant as Martin Luther's, and that they have to correct and resist, which is what they're doing at that Catholic Identity Conference. They would rather believe in such a defected heretical church as the true bride of Christ than believe that Jorge Bergoglio and his 5 predecessors of unhappy memory are not actually popes. I don't know what it is. I guess it's a kind of a spiritual version of Stockholm Syndrome. Yeah, have you heard of Stockholm Syndrome? Let me give you the definition you'll find in Wikipedia, because it gets to the heart of the matter. Quote, Stockholm Syndrome is a condition that causes hostages to develop a psychological alliance with their captors as a survival strategy during captivity. These feelings, resulting from a bond formed between captor and captives during intimate time spent together, are generally considered irrational in light of the danger or risk endured by the victims. Generally speaking, Stockholm Syndrome consists of strong emotional ties that develop between two persons, where one person intermittently harasses, beats, threatens, abuses, or intimidates the other, unquote. So maybe that's what's happening here in a spiritual sense. Francis and his 5 predecessors have demolished Catholicism to the best of their abilities, and people are still sticking up for them. He's the Holy Father. Sister Lucy said he'd have much to suffer. Yeah, exactly. He'll have much to suffer. But these false Vatican II popes have been causing much suffering. That's pretty much the opposite, isn't it? So, who knows? Maybe it really is a spiritual version of Stockholm Syndrome. I don't know. It's their survival strategy, I guess. But the irony is that these people have traded in the papacy for a pope. They have decided they would rather have a meaningless papacy, but someone to occupy the office, than to retain the true nature and significance of this most highly exalted office, this divinely instituted office, and have no one who currently occupies it. So they've purchased their pope, as it were, at the price of the papacy. And because they've done that, because they've exchanged the papacy for a pope, the result is that they now have neither. They have neither the true doctrine of the papacy nor a true pope. And this is terrifying. You know, perhaps people don't fully realize this, but if you abandon the true doctrine of the papacy, you're abandoning the Catholic faith. You cease being a Catholic altogether. You're just as non-Catholic as Francis, then. If Francis is a valid pope, then the papacy has no meaning. Then the Catholic Church is just another human institution, a fake church like all the others. Then the papacy does not, in fact, enjoy God's protection, as the Church teaches it does. Then the Pope can be a communist, a modernist, a Protestant, a radical environmentalist that worships nature, a pacifist, an atheist, anything really. So, by stubbornly maintaining against all the evidence that Francis is nonetheless a true pope, people are distorting and totally abandoning the papacy. People, take heart. The papacy is true. It's Bergoglio that is false. So stop doubting the papacy and start doubting Bergoglio.